off by welcoming you, Hank, to our Fresh Fiction Virtual Book Club. So great to have you here tonight.
This is amazing. I am so honored to be here. I have adored Fresh Fiction from the day I began writing, and to hear you all chatting this evening is really a joy. I'm so pleased to be invited.
Well, you get to hear the whole variety of everything that we're reading. And of course, then our bonus question tied into your book, of course, with The Strangers on the Train. It's a classic piece of writing. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you tonight.
Well, thank you. I was sort of eavesdropping on what everybody was saying, and I can't begin to tell you how fascinating you all are. Every single thing that you said, I'm just sort of soaking in and thinking about it. Because you're so wise and so savvy, and you know what you like, and you're so articulate about it. And it's frankly kind of reassuring to know that there are such smart readers out there. So I absolutely enjoyed being a fly on the wall for a little bit.
Even, our serious reads to our pure fun, and even some of our guilty pleasures that we admit to, right?
Well, I think there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure in reading. And if you're reading and you're happy, that's what this is all about. So never feel guilty about anything.
Exactly, right? Well, and that's the joy, right? Because there are so many different types of books out there. And depending on what your mood is at the time, you've got such a selection to pick from.
Well, did you hear? I don't think anybody repeated. I mean, you would imagine that people would say they're reading the same book, because we think about that there's a big wave of books that everybody's reading. And, this wonderful club proves that in this particular case, that's not true. I was fascinated by that.
Yeah, we get a lot of recommendations from each other too. Yeah. So listening to people, there were some that I have on my TBR list. There are some that I finished last month. There was another series that we were mentioning, and everyone's on a different book in that series. So we're kind of comparing notes as to, okay, I'm on book 13. I'm on book number 15. I'm on book 5 of this, one of the spinoff series. So we try to keep each other accountable with that.
Well, it's interesting. I was president of National Sisters in Crime a few years ago. And before I became president, they hired a company to do a survey. And it was very expensive, I will tell you, because it's just us. They hired a company to do a survey to find out why people bought the books they bought. And guess what the answer was?
Hopefully it wasn't to impress people.
No, it was word of mouth. They bought, because their friends told them to, because their friends recommended it. And as an author, I want you all to know how incredibly important that is. The idea that you love a book and you tell a friend. Remember that Prell commercial? She tells two friends, and she tells two friends, and she tells two friends. And that's how book world works. And there's nothing more important from my point of view than to hear you all talk about books. It's just the joy of my life.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I have to admit, I first really got into your writing when I saw you at BoucherCon when it was here in Dallas, and I think it was 2019. Yes. And so all of the psychological suspense thriller, just at the edge of the seat with most books. So how did you actually get started with writing?
Well, I was the guest of honor at that BoucherCon in Dallas, which is the World Mystery Convention. And it was the most amazing experience I've had in a long time. The other guest of honor was James Patterson. So it was me and James Patterson. And so that was quite an adventure, as you can imagine. How did I get started, Samantha? That's such a great question. And it's fascinating because I'm sort of the poster child for following your dreams in midlife. I didn't start writing until I was 55 years old, which is 17 years ago. I've been a television reporter for 43 years. And I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise. But one day at Channel 7 here in Boston, I just had a good idea. I had a good idea for a novel. And I came home and I said to my husband, I have a great idea. I'm going to write a novel. And Jonathan says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a novel? And I said, how hard can that be? I've read 1 million books. How hard can it be? And I soon learned how hard it could be. but I was absolutely obsessed with writing what turned out to be Primetime, which became my first novel, which won the Agatha Award for Best First Novel and won a Fresh Fiction Award as well, which is sitting right there on my mantle. And it was life-changing to me. And, if you take nothing from tonight, except my book, reading my book, if you love it, I am really the proof that it is never too late to follow your dreams. It is never too late to do something that you always wanted to do. My husband and I don't celebrate the anniversary of the day we met. We celebrate the anniversary of the day before we met. And we call that You Never Know Day, because you never know what wonderful thing is around the next corner.
I love that.
Because we think, oh, we're sad. We're never going to be happy. We're never going to, whatever it is, fill in the blank. It's never going to happen. And then the next day it does. The phone rings or the email or the door knocks or the letter or whatever it is, that's your heart's desire is around the corner. And you just didn't know. So every day is You Never Know Day, because we never know what wonderful thing is about to happen.
Wow. I love that. Oh gosh.
And that's what happened to me with writing.
Yes.
Well, and that's what happened to me with writing. Exactly. Because that first book was a life-changing moment for me and was the beginning of my career as a crime fiction author. And The House Guest is my 14th book. And I cannot begin to tell you how impossible a thought that is. If you had told me that 15 years ago, I would have said there is not a chance in the world, not a chance in the world.
But I'm also fascinated with the parallels with your day job. You said longtime investigative reporter, multiple Emmys, as we can see on the shelves behind you there. And so pursuing that, the different secrets and stories and bringing justice to different elements, and how that's also seen in a lot of your books, and that the different characters are ultimately trying to bring about different kinds of justice and making the world right. And there's elements of that in this current book too, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. That is my reason for being. That you have hit exactly, Samantha. Thank you, on the total themes of why I write. It's interesting because writing for television, being an investigative reporter, and being a crime fiction author, I write psychological suspense. Being a crime fiction author are so similar when you come right down to the essence of it, because my television stories and my crime fiction stories, I need a character who you really care about and who you really relate to. I need an important problem that needs to be solved. I track down clues and follow leads and look at documents and do interviews and do research. And in the end, whether it's television or whether it's writing fiction, I want the good guys to win and the bad guys to get what's coming to them. And I want some justice, and I want to change the world a little bit. I want to change your life a little bit. When you're watching my television investigative stories or when you're reading my novels, I want you to close that book and say, I never thought about it that way. I'm so glad I read this. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. I feel satisfied and content. That shiver that you get when you read a good book or hear a good story, that's what I'm going for in my novels. And that's what I'm going for on television. I don't want you to turn the channel when my stories are on TV. It's so easy, click, click, click. You change the channel and you go away. And I always say, I want you to miss your stop on the subway because you're reading my book, or stay up way too late just to read one more chapter. That's the highest compliment that anybody can get.
Well, I've definitely stayed up late a few different times.
Isn't that fun when that happens? When you find a really good book and the walls fall away and you're in the story. There's nothing better than that. And I loved hearing people talk about the books that they love, that they're staying up too late to read. And I so relate to that.
Well, and with that too, I think that's one of the things that really grabs people with the current book, with The House Guest. The initial premise of it is, with Alyssa, where her entire world is essentially yanked out from under her and having to deal with what are all of those repercussions, right? It's not just the dissolution of her marriage, but the the status that goes along with it. And then how easily it is to then form this other new relationship with Bree. And then, the cat and mouse game all ensues. I mean, for some of the premises of these things, do the ideas come to you just out of the blue? I mean, what was the premise for this book? Did it come out of another story that you came across from your investigative journalism? Because it just resonates so true.
Oh, thank you. Two quick things. Quickly, when we meet Alyssa McCallan, the main character of the story, she is heartbroken. Who of us hasn't been heartbroken? She is devastated. Who of us hasn't been devastated by something that's happened in our lives? And exactly as you say, Samantha, she's had the rug pulled out from under her. She's been married to someone she loves for 8 years. And at that moment we meet her, he has walked out, he has left her with no explanation. He won't tell her why. She's terrified, she's alone, and it seems like he's trying to ruin her life. Not just leave, but ruin her life. He's taken the friends, he's threatening to take the house, and he's threatening to take all the money and leave her alone. Why? Why would he do that? I mean, she's absolutely devastated and baffled and terrified because he seems to be coming into her house now, a place he's not supposed to be when she's not home, and leaving little bits of evidence that he's been there, taking a dress off a hanger and throwing it on the floor, or leaving a knife in the middle of the dining room. It's, creepy, but not harmful. And what that is a show of power. It's a show that no matter what the rules are, Bill McCallan can break them. So the story in its essence, though, is about Alyssa getting her power back. It's about female empowerment. It's about how we as people can be strong. We don't need to be described by being part of someone else's life. We can stand on our own. And that's sort of the underlying theme of the story. And it's also about loyalty and trust and love. And where the story, I always say, in a devastating divorce, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you deserve. So Thelma and Louise, that's maybe Bree and Alyssa, meets Gaslight. Maybe that's Bill McCallan and his wife, Alyssa, maybe. Meets Strangers on a Train. Maybe it's Strangers on a Train, but maybe it isn't. So where the idea came from, listen to this. I have a pal from another part of my life who was happily married. She was smart and savvy and successful with a very responsible job. I mean, I'm talking about a competent, cool woman. And she was married to a cool guy, a responsible guy with a reasonable professional job, like an accountant or a real estate person or something like that, a financial person, something along those lines. And every morning she'd say, "Bye, honey, see you for dinner. I'm headed to work." And he'd say, "Bye, honey, see you for dinner. I'm headed to work." Until the police came to the door. After years of this, the police came to the door, and it turned out that he had not been to work one day in their lives, that his job was pretend, that he had just been telling her that he was going to work, when actually he was staying home and doing incredibly disgusting, nefarious things on the computer. And here's the key, she didn't know. She truly, and I can tell you, she had no idea. Now we hear about women who, Ted Bundy's girlfriend and the wife of BTK and his family, and they'd say, "Oh, I didn't know, he seemed like such a quiet guy." How often have we heard that? And we say, "Come on, sister, you're not paying attention. If you don't know what's going on, you're not paying attention." But I can tell you that my friend did not know. She totally did not know. And so that's what got me thinking about, how much do we really know about that person who's sharing a pillow with us? How much do we really know about that colleague at work who seems to be our best pal? Could they be keeping a secret from us that we wouldn't know about? Would we know? And then I thought, well, could I keep a secret from someone who loved me? And I think, sure, I could probably do that. And then I thought, well, if I could do it, what if they could do it? And that was the beginning of the house guest. How we keep secrets from each other and why. And could a spouse really not know what their spouse was doing? And that was fascinating to me.
And again, I think that's with the different types of books, because with our book club, a lot of times we might read something that is so fantastical in nature, but on the flip side, especially with these types of psychological suspense, there is that kernel of truth. I mean, I work as an engineer in my day job. So you think, okay, everyone's typical engineer, but again, people have those hidden depths. And when there is something that happens, I was kind of in a similar situation with somebody at work, and it was like, well, did you know? And I'm like, no, I thought it was just a bad breakup. Who would have ever imagined all the other blowback that came about with it? But that's where I think it really helps pull the reader in, because you always start thinking of, how else would other people handle this, right?
And I think, my books don't have graphic violence in them. They're not scary. They're not horror. They're not going to give you nightmares. One of you said you had nightmares about scary things. They're not going to give you nightmares. They're just going to make you think. I mean, I think sometimes that the damage that people do to each other by gaslighting, by manipulation, by deception. I mean, we all know people who are like that, who will say, well, I'm sure you think that's a good idea. I'm not sure I do, but you go on, you do whatever you think is right. Or that sort of whispering in your ear of, did you hear what she said about you?
Yes.
What if that's not true? I mean, that kind of gossip and that kind of disequilibrium is really dangerous and incredibly destructive. So those are the kinds of dangers that I write about in my book. What we do to each other, not with a gun or a knife or anything gruesome, but just by the power of persuasion. And that's pretty devastating.
Well, before we get into our fresh fiction facts, there's one question in particular I want to ask you, which is a little bit of a spin. Because of your journalism side, where normally you are the reporter, you're the one doing the investigation, asking the questions. How is it then to spin that in cases like this, where you are the interviewee and having to be on the spot and to answer everything?
It's terrifying.
Is it a natural transition?
No, it's absolutely terrifying. It gives me really a great insight into how it feels to be in the interviewee side of the microphone, because you are so right. I am so used to being the one asking the questions. And it's, because I don't know what you're going to ask me. And so it's a lot of pressure. So that's really funny. That's a really funny question from you, because I own it. I'm terrified. Let me just tell you that.
Well, hopefully this hasn't been too bad.
I think I'll live. I will live.
Okay. Well, now it's the really scary part, jumping into our fresh fiction facts. So these are off the wall, different types of questions, meant to be fairly quick, off the top of your head, but it's a wide range of things. Okay.
Okay.
All right. What is your favorite writing fuel?
Fuel?
Fuel.
Latte. Triple venti non-fat latte.
Oh, very specific.
Yes, very specific.
Okay. What is your favorite distraction when you're avoiding writing?
Oh, I'll do anything to avoid writing. On the days that I don't want to write, I have honestly alphabetized my spice rack. I actually did that one day. I actually contemplated changing the shelf paper in my cabinets in the kitchen. You know how hard that is? That's the worst possible job. I guess my favorite distraction is, I also fold the laundry. I get the mail. I check my email. I decide what to have for dinner. I mean, all those kinds of things. What I do is, in order to stop being distracted, I set a timer for 34 minutes. And I say, I'm not getting up from this desk to do anything for 34 minutes. And that really works.
Why 34 minutes?
Because, I don't know, because 30 minutes didn't seem long enough. And 45 minutes seemed too long. So 34 minutes of total focus seemed like something I could do. It works. It really works.
Okay. Who was your first book boyfriend or girlfriend?
Oh, well, my first book, Girlfriend, was certainly Nancy Drew. There was no question about it. And then later, I fell in love with Dorothy Sayers' Lord Peter Wimsey. I loved Lord Peter Wimsey with his top hat and monocle and his British accent and his, he's so smart and so witty and so clever. I also went through eventually, I fell in love with Inspector Morse, but that was later.
What is your most dog-eared or reread book?
Oh, there's a book called A Winter's Tale by Mark Helprin, which is magical realism from many years ago. I want to say the 80s. And it takes place in New York City on New Year's Eve in, I think, 1990 and 1890 at the same time. And it's about a flying horse and love and devotion and ice and winter and fantasy. It's gorgeous. And it's beautifully written and absolutely transporting. It's called A Winter's Tale by Mark Helprin.
I'm kind of scared to admit this. I haven't read the book, but I think I saw the movie with Colin Farrell.
Yes, the movie had Colin Farrell. It isn't like that. I mean, that we could talk for hours about how the movie isn't as good as the book. Well, This is clearly an illustration of how just forget the movie, just go read the book.
Okay, so definitely add that to my TBR list then, huh?
It's big, I will warn you. So take it on vacation or something.
Who is your favorite one-hit wonder?
One-hit wonder, Harper Lee, maybe.
Okay.
With To Kill a Mockingbird, you can't really get better than that, even though apparently, and even though she knew it, I guess, when her other book never came out, and not till after she died, and it was so controversial. But I think Harper Lee.
Okay. What is something that you own a ridiculous amount of?
Well, I can tell you this very quickly. When we had our house appraised for the insurance person some years ago, I guess it was by now, the time just goes by. And the insurance appraiser, they walk through the house and they look at everything. And he came downstairs where we were waiting in the dining room or wherever, and he looked at me and he goes, I just went through your dressing room. And I said, oh, please don't make a comment about the shoes. Please don't make a comment about the shoes. And he said, lady, I've seen people with lots of shoes, but I've never seen anyone with so many black blazers. So I guess.
Oh, wow.
I mean, but that's what I wear on TV, all different kinds of black blazers. And I guess I never thought about a stranger seeing my closet, my dressing room. So I guess there are a lot of black blazers in it.
I can understand that. I mean,
and they're all different, Samantha.
Different styles, right? Yeah, yes.
Of course, it's not just, I remember my producer once had a new boyfriend, and she said she wasn't quite sure that they were going to be able to stay together because they were walking through a department store. And she said, oh, look, black sandals. And he said to her, don't you already have black sandals? No. And she said, I didn't even know what to say to him. I didn't even.
Yes, there is an absurdly amount of black clothing in my closet, but there's specific reasons why I have each of those pieces, right?
100%.
Yes. What clique did you hang out with in high school?
None. I was such a misfit. I was such an outcast. It was terrible. I had the most miserable high school, middle school. Oh, I had no friends. My only friends were the characters in books. My only friends were the characters in books. They, how they have best dressed, most popular, most, I was most individual. And you know what that means, like most misfit, most, we don't want to sit with you at lunch. I can prove it. They put my picture in the school paper upside down to show how weird I was.
Oh, so, gosh.
No cliques. I was a loner. All I did was read books and watch old movies on TV, and voila.
Voila is exactly right, huh? What is the most unnecessary thing that you absolutely cannot live without? Unnecessary or luxury item?
Luxury item. I wear Armani lipstick, and it is very expensive. and I don't care.
That's all right. I understand that. They used to laugh at me because whenever I would travel for work, and I would always stop in the duty-free store for particular Bobbi Brown lipstick. And I'm like, this is where I can get it, and let me stock up, right?
And if it works, it works. If it works, it works.
You've been kidnapped. 2 hours later, you're returned because you can't stop talking about what?
Well, I was probably planning my new book and probably trying to figure out what will happen in my new book and have an idea for my new book. And what if it's this? And what if it's this? And what if she does that? And no, that will never work because of this. I have driven my husband from the room enough times that when in talking about my novels, I mean, he's a criminal defense attorney. Mm-hmm. He's marvelous. He's brilliant. He's a big help. But sometimes I can just see, let me tell you, I'll tell you this. One day we were driving home from work. Jonathan would drive and I would talk. And one day we were driving home from work. This is obviously before the pandemic. And I realized I had talked all the way home about whatever it was. I had talked all the way home. And as we turned into our driveway, I said, oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm terrible. I talked the whole way home. Forgive me. That's so rude. I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry for talking all the way home. And he says, oh, sweetheart, that's okay. I had you on mute.
Oh my gosh.
just, emotional mute, mental mute, imaginary mute. So it was just washing right over him. So
is he a good resource to help bounce things off of? Because I know with his history as being such a big criminal and civil with his accounts and everything, I mean, in cases, has that, I mean, do you guys ever cross and compare notes, or is it all completely separate? Yes.
Or it's a perfect question. I'm the luckiest person in the world about that. To be a crime fiction author and to have a criminal defense and civil rights attorney as a husband, it's in-house counsel. It's in-house counsel every day. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's interesting about that combination is that Jonathan has these life or death cases. He handles
big cases
and big important life and death cases. I mean, we don't have the death penalty in Massachusetts, but certainly murder cases. And when he creates his closing arguments in his murder trials, and I work with him on the closing arguments because a closing argument is a compelling story. You're telling the jury a compelling story, and I help him craft those closing arguments. So as just like my books do, his closing arguments are a good, riveting, compelling, persuasive story. So we are a very good team. We didn't get married till I was 46 and he was 56. So we've been married for 27 years now, something like that. Somebody do the math. So, it's another one of those things that is just a marvelous match, marvelous, lucky match.
Well, that took me on a little bit of a tangent. I didn't mean to go that way, but
no, it's a good question. That's a great question. Plus, somehow he turned out to be, his mother was an English teacher and a principal, a high school principal. And Jonathan has turned out to be this astonishingly great proofreader. He can find a mistake in. And my dad, who was my biological father, who was a newspaper reporter, the music critic for the old Chicago Daily News, had a great saying, which was, there's always another typo. And Jonathan can always find them. So what a treasure to have a built-in proofreader as well.
Definitely. Yes. Well, you heard our, what have we been reading, writing, reading, watching, and listening to? What about you? What have you been reading, watching, and listening to?
Well, I've been watching, my husband and I have been watching You, which I was interested to hear somebody else was watching. Maybe it was Meg, I'm not sure, or Margaret was watching You. And I keep thinking, I'm not watching this anymore. I'm just not going to watch it anymore. And then I say, I'm just going to watch one more episode. I'm just going to watch one more episode. So I'm sort of on the fence about that. I watched Magpie Murders, the Anthony Horowitz mystery show on PBS, which I loved beyond everything I could possibly love. And we just watched Under the Banner of Heaven. I think we were late to that, the John Krakauer nonfiction novel about the murders in Utah. And that was really quite astonishing. What I'm reading, I'll just look in, well, I've got some books here on my desk. Look what I just finished. New. I know. I'm sorry to make you
jealous.
Yeah, I love Lisa Jewell. She is astonishing. She is a genius. She's absolutely amazing. And you all have read Lisa Jewell's books, right? Many of them.
Yes.
Everyone is better than the last. And this is about a podcaster, a gorgeous British woman podcaster who is doing a series about interesting women for her podcast, and she picks just the wrong woman to interview. So it's really, really good. Have you read this? I have this right here. Have you read this? Gillian McAllister's
I haven't, but I've been hearing a lot of recommendations from people. Yes. It
is such a smart book and such a clever book, and so gorgeously structured. It starts out with a woman, a mom, watching her teenage son, happen to see her teenage son kill someone. And she's astonished and baffled. Why did that happen? And then the next day she wakes up and it's the day before the murder. And then the next day she wakes up and it's the day before that. And it's amazingly gorgeously structured. How could you write a book like that? And it's her figuring out what she should have noticed about what her son was doing and what was happening in their lives. And it's not just a murder mystery written in this gorgeous way. It's also a sort of story about mothers and children, and how we go through our lives so quickly that we don't notice the things that we should notice, and how often we go back and say, oh, if only I hadn't seen that, if only I had latched onto that, if only I had been paying attention, I would have seen that. It's kind of poignant, actually, and really, really good. And finally, this, All That Is Mine I Carry With Me by William Landay. William Landay wrote Defending Jacob, and which became an Apple TV show with either Chris Pine or who's the other one? Chris Pine or Chris Evans. It's
Evans or Pratt? Evans? I think it's Evans. Yeah.
So somebody in the chat, tell me if it's Chris Pine or Chris Evans who was in Defending Jacob with Michelle Dockery, who was Lady Mary from Downton Abbey, in an Apple TV show on Defending Jacob. But this is Chris Evans says, Lady Sarah, thank you. This is his new book, 10 years after Defending Jacob. I mean, Defending Jacob was on the New York Times list for like 10,000 weeks. And so how do you come after that? How do you not be a one-hit wonder? And this is Bill, as you were saying, and this is Bill Landay not being a one-hit wonder. It's astonishing. It's astonishingly good. So that's what I'm reading.
What's the best way for our readers to keep in touch with you and find out what to expect next?
Please, please, please find me on Instagram. Please, please, please. It's at Hank P. Ryan. Instagram, BookBub. Facebook at Hank P. Ryan. No, it's Hank Phillippi Ryan author. Hank Phillippi Ryan author on Facebook. And do please sign up for my newsletter by going to my website, hankphillippiryan.com, hankphillippiryan.com. You can put that in the chat. I'll put it in the chat. Go to contact and click on contact. Sign up for my newsletter. If you want to contact me via the website, it comes right to me. There's no person in the middle. There's only I see the email that comes through the website. So click on contact and it'll come right to me. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, BookBub, and even at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, BookBub, website. That's my chant.
And before we head over into our happy hour unrecorded Q&A with our readers, can you give us any hint of what we should expect from you next?
You can't tell. I will tell you a little bit, but you can't tell.
Okay, so maybe save it then for the unrecorded portion?
It's been out. Well,
okay.
Yeah, let's say, you know what? We're going to save it for the unrecorded portion.
Okay,
see, and you'll have to find out this time next year.
Well, Hank, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and stick around because I know we're going to have some questions in the after hours.
My complete pleasure. And I'd love to answer any questions that you all have.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for reading The House Guest. If you did, I hope you loved it. If you did, please leave a review wherever you leave reviews. As you know, and I'm sure you talk about it, it's the lifeblood for authors. I used to be on the board of the Lyric Stage Company of Boston, which is a professional stage company, theater company here in Boston. And the producing executive director would come out at the beginning of every show and say, if you love our production, make sure you tell your friends. If you didn't like it, don't tell anyone. And so that's how we all feel about reviews. If you didn't like it, just don't say anything. So thank you all. Thank you, Samantha. And thank you, Sarah. And thank you all for inviting me this evening. It is such an honor. And I hope you invite me back next year for the secret book.
Definitely. Okay, stick around and stay tuned. Thank you.